I'm Melissa Gilbert.
I'm 27 years old. And the day my family decided to erase me, they made sure the whole world was watching. I turned onto our street after a double shift, my body aching, my mind already counting down to collapsing into bed. Then I saw the phones. 4 of them, all pointed at our front yard like paparazzi at a crime scene. That's when I noticed my things. Everything I owned was scattered across the lawn in torn garbage bags. My clothes were tangled with broken picture frames. My laptop sat in a puddle, screen shattered. My childhood journals were ripped open, pages fluttering in the wind like they meant nothing. My mother stood in the center of it all, phone raised high, performing for her audience. 27 years old, and still living off me like a leech. Today, she learns what the real world looks like. She didn't look at me once. She looked at the hearts flooding her screen. My brother kicked one of my bags so hard the contents exploded across the grass. My sister zoomed in on my face, narrating my humiliation like it was entertainment. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I loaded what I could into my car with numb hands and drove away in silence. They thought they'd finally thrown out the family burden. What they didn't know is that 3 months later, they'd be sitting across from my lawyer, realizing I owned half of everything they thought was theirs. If you want to see how a family that threw me away like garbage ended up begging for my forgiveness, make sure you're subscribed. Because what happens next they never saw coming. It didn't start with trash bags on a lawn. It started 2 years earlier, when I lost my job at the marketing firm and my mother opened her arms wide with a smile that should have been my first warning. Come home, sweetheart. Just until you get back on your feet. I was 25 then, still believing that family meant safety. Still thinking that the woman who raised me wouldn't see my vulnerability as an opportunity. The basement became my world. Not a bedroom, a basement. Concrete floors, a space heater that rattled all night, and a folding table I used as a desk. My mother said it was temporary. She said I just needed to contribute a little to help with bills. $350 a month. Reasonable, she called it. A steal compared to rent anywhere else. What she didn't mention was that she'd be collecting receipts. Mental receipts. Every single thing I touched, every utility I used, every square foot of space I occupied. She kept a running tally in her head, and every time I tried to stand up straight, she'd remind me how much I owed her for the privilege of existing under her roof. My brother and sister watched it happen and said nothing. Why would they? They were the golden ones. My brother had his auto shop that barely broke even but made him look successful. My sister had her social media following that made her feel important. And I was the cautionary tale they'd use in conversations with their friends. At least I'm not like Melissa, still living with mom at my age. I found freelance design work 6 months after moving in. Small projects, inconsistent pay, but it was something. I was rebuilding. My mother saw it differently. She saw me on my laptop in the kitchen and asked why I wasn't out looking for a real job. She saw the small deposits in my account and increased my rent to $500. When I questioned it, she looked at me like I'd slapped her. After everything I've done for you, you're going to nickel and dime your own mother? So I paid it, and I shrank a little more. I started eating dinner in the basement to avoid the family meals where I became the punchline. I stopped talking about my clients because my accomplishments were dismissed as hobbies. I made myself smaller and quieter, thinking that if I just didn't take up too much space, I could save enough to leave. But every time I got close, something happened. My car needed repairs. My mother needed help with the bill. My brother needed to borrow money he'd never pay back. The basement became quicksand, and every month I sank a little deeper. By the time I turned 27, I'd convinced myself this was normal. That I deserved this. That I was the problem. That's exactly what they wanted me to believe. And it's exactly why they never saw me coming. The job offer came on a Tuesday. A full-time position at a digital agency downtown, salary with benefits, everything I'd been working toward for 2 years. I stared at the email for 10 minutes before I let myself believe it was real. I was getting out. I waited until dinner to tell them, actually believing they'd be happy for me. My mother was cutting into her chicken when I said it. I got a job. A real one. I start in 2 weeks. The fork stopped midair. My brother looked up from his phone. My sister's eyes narrowed like I'd just announced I was joining a cult. Doing what? My mother asked, her voice flat. Graphic design. For a marketing agency. It's full-time and the pay is... So, you're going to sit at a computer all day making pictures? My brother laughed. That's not a real job, Mel. That's a hobby that someone's dumb enough to pay you for. My sister nodded, her fingers already typing something on her phone. Probably updating her followers about her delusional sister. How long until they realize you're not worth what they're paying you? I felt my face flush, but I pushed through. It's a good opportunity. I'll be able to save up and find my own place in a few months. That's when my mother's fork hit the plate. The sound cracked through the kitchen like a gunshot. Your own place. She repeated it slowly, like she was tasting poison. After everything I've done for you. After I opened my home when no one else would take you in. Now you're going to abandon me the second you get a little money? I'm not abandoning anyone. You're just being selfish. As usual. She stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. You know what? If you're so eager to be independent, your rent's going up. $700 a month, starting now. $700? Mom, that's what it costs to live here. If you don't like it, there's the door. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Oh wait, you can't leave yet, can you? You don't have first month's rent and a deposit saved up. Guess you'll be staying a little longer after all. My brother smirked. My sister took a photo of my face, and I heard the sound of it posting instantly. The next 2 weeks were warfare. My mother scheduled family obligations during my work hours, then called me ungrateful when I couldn't attend. My sister posted vague stories about family members who think they're better than everyone else. My brother started parking behind my car, so I'd have to ask him to move it every morning, and half the time he wouldn't answer his phone. They weren't celebrating my success. They were punishing me for it. Because as long as I stayed small and struggling, they could feel big and successful. But the moment I started climbing out of that basement, I became a mirror showing them exactly who they really were. And they couldn't let that stand. I drove for 20 minutes before I realized I had nowhere to go. My hands were still shaking on the steering wheel, my phone buzzing nonstop with notifications I couldn't bring myself to look at. Every red light felt like it lasted an hour. Every breath hurt. Then I remembered Jenna. We'd worked together at the marketing firm before the layoffs, stayed in touch through occasional coffee meetups where she'd listen to me explain away my family's behavior with excuses I'd perfected over 2 years. She lived in a small apartment across town, and when I called her, my voice barely holding together, she didn't ask questions. Get here.
Now.
I'll leave the door unlocked. I arrived with 3 half-torn garbage bags and a box of broken belongings. Jenna took one look at me and pulled me inside. She didn't hug me. She didn't say it would be okay. She just sat me down on her couch and handed me her laptop. Show me. I didn't want to. I didn't want to see what they'd done, what they'd said, how many people had watched me being erased in real time. But Jenna's face was set, and something about her anger on my behalf made me feel less alone. The video was everywhere. My mother's live stream had been clipped and reshared across 3 platforms. 12,000 views. Hundreds of comments. Most of them were laughing. Some were cheering my mother on for her tough love. A few asked what I'd done to deserve it. My sister had posted her own version with a caption, "Sometimes you have to take out the trash, even when it's family." 4,000 likes. My brother had shared a photo of my broken laptop with the words, "Freeloading ends today." Jenna's jaw clenched tighter with every swipe. This is abuse. You know that, right? This isn't tough love or teaching you a lesson. This is public humiliation for entertainment. I wanted to defend them. The instinct was still there, buried under 2 years of conditioning. But watching it from the outside, seeing the performance of it all, the way they'd coordinated their phones and their angles and their cruelty, something finally cracked open inside me. Why would they do this? My voice sounded small, childlike. Jenna set the laptop down and looked at me directly. Because they needed you to stay broken. You were getting out, Mel. You had a real job, real money coming in, and they knew they were losing control. She pulled up my mother's Facebook page, scrolling back through months of posts. Pictures of family dinners I wasn't invited to. Vacation photos I hadn't known about. A post from 3 weeks ago about how hard it was to support adult children who refused to grow up. They've been building a narrative, Jenna said quietly. Making you the villain in their story, so when they finally threw you out, everyone would applaud them for it. I stared at the screen, at the smiling faces of people who were supposed to love me, and realized I'd been cast as the antagonist in my own life. But I didn't have to accept that role anymore. I couldn't sleep that first night at Jenna's. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother's face lit by her phone screen, performing my destruction for an audience. So I sat on the floor at 3 a.m., sorting through what I'd managed to salvage from the lawn. Most of it was ruined. Water-damaged clothes, broken picture frames, a journal with pages torn out like someone had been looking for secrets to use against me. Then I found a manila folder at the bottom of one of the bags, crumpled and dirty, but intact. I didn't recognize it at first. The label was in my grandfather's handwriting. Melissa, important. Open when you're ready. My grandfather had died 4 years ago. I remembered the funeral, my mother crying theatrically, my siblings hovering around her like bodyguards. I remembered asking about his will and being told everything had been left to my mother to distribute as she saw fit. Family business, nothing I needed to worry about. I opened the folder. The first document was a copy of his will, dated 6 months before his death. I started reading, my eyes struggling to focus in the dim light from Jenna's kitchen. Then I saw my name, and my heart stopped. To my granddaughter Melissa Gilbert, I leave the following: 40% ownership of the family home at 428 Maple Drive, 30% ownership of the rental property at 1523 Austin Boulevard, and 40% ownership of Gilbert Auto Repair. I read it 3 times. Then 4. The words didn't change. The house I'd been living in, paying rent for, sleeping in a basement like a tenant. I owned 40% of it. The rental property in Austin that my mother had mentioned once, casually, as a little investment property that barely breaks even. I owned 30% of it. My brother's auto shop, the one that made him feel so superior, the business he lorded over me at every family dinner. I owned 40% of it. My hands started shaking so badly, I had to set the papers down. There were more documents underneath. Rental income statements from the Austin property showing consistent monthly deposits of $3,200. Property tax records with my name listed as a co-owner. A letter from my grandfather's lawyer dated 4 years ago, addressed to my mother, outlining her legal obligation to inform me of my inheritance within 30 days. 4 years ago, I was 23, still living on my own, still employed, still whole. She'd received this letter and said nothing. She'd collected rent from me for a house I partially owned. She'd watched me struggle and beg and shrink while sitting on documents that proved I'd never been the burden she'd convinced me I was. I'd been paying rent to live in my own house. My brother had been running a business I partly owned without ever telling me. My mother had been collecting income from a property that was legally mine. They hadn't just humiliated me. They'd been robbing me for 4 years. And they'd almost gotten away with it. Jenna knew a lawyer. Not a family friend or someone's cousin, but a real estate attorney named Patricia Voss who had a reputation for not tolerating nonsense. She agreed to see me that same week. I walked into her office with the manila folder clutched against my chest like a life raft. Ms. Voss was in her 50s, with sharp eyes and an even sharper handshake. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Show me what you have." I spread the documents across her desk, my hands still unsteady. She put on her reading glasses and went silent. For 10 minutes, the only sound was pages turning and the occasional hum of consideration. Then she set down the will and looked at me. How long did you live in that house paying rent? 2 years. And they never told you that you owned 40% of it?
Never.
My mother said everything was left to her, that it was simpler that way. Ms. Voss leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. What your mother did is called concealment of inheritance. In this state, when a beneficiary deliberately hides or fails to disclose assets to another beneficiary, there are serious legal consequences. She tapped the will. Your grandfather included a specific clause here. Did you see Section 7? I hadn't. I'd been too shocked by the ownership percentages to read the fine print. She pointed to a paragraph near the bottom, and I read it slowly. In the event that any beneficiary attempts to conceal, misrepresent, or unlawfully withhold another beneficiary's rightful inheritance, the concealing party shall forfeit 15% of their own inheritance to the wronged party as penalty. My mother owned 60% of the house. If she forfeited 15%, that meant, you'd own 55%, Ms. Voss said, reading my mind. Majority ownership, which means final say on what happens to the property. My throat went dry. She pulled out a calculator and a legal pad. Now, let's talk about damages. The Austin rental property generates $3,200 a month. You own 30%. Your share would be $960 monthly. Over 4 years, that's $46,080 they've kept from you. I felt dizzy. Then there's the rent you paid. $350 a month initially, then $500, then $700 for the final months. Let's average it at $450. Over 2 years, that's $10,800 you paid to live in a home you partially owned. She wrote the numbers down in neat columns. Add in the auto shop. Your brother would need to provide 4 years of financial records showing profit distribution. If he's been taking income without paying you your 40% share, that's additional damages. She looked up at me, her expression firm. Melissa, conservatively, your family has stolen or withheld at least $56,000 from you. Probably more. The number hung in the air between us like a verdict. What do I do? Ms. Voss smiled for the first time since I'd walked in. We make them pay every penny back. The first message came 2 days after I hired Ms. Voss. My sister's Instagram story, a screenshot of a concerned citizen asking about me, with her reply typed out in bold letters. My sister is threatening legal action against our grieving mother over my grandfather's estate. Some people have no shame. Please send Mom your love during this difficult time. Within an hour, my phone exploded. Messages from accounts I didn't recognize flooded my DMs. Most of them called me ungrateful. Several called me worse. A few included threats detailed enough that Jenna made me screenshot everything and send it to Ms. Voss. My sister's followers were treating my life like a reality show they could vote on, and they decided I was the villain. She posted again that evening. A tearful video, her voice cracking at all the right moments. Family is supposed to be forever, but some people only care about money. My mom took her in when she had nothing, and this is how she repays us. I just hope she can live with herself. 15,000 views in 3 hours. The comments were unanimous. I was a leech, a gold digger, a disgrace. Someone found my LinkedIn and left a review on my new company's page. Employs a woman currently suing her own family. Disgusting. I stopped checking my phone after that. But my brother didn't stop. He found me 4 days later in the parking lot of a grocery store. I was loading bags into my trunk when his truck pulled up behind me, blocking me in. He got out slowly, like he had all the time in the world. We need to talk. I have nothing to say to you. Yeah, well, I have plenty to say to you. He stepped closer, and I instinctively moved back against my car. You really think you're going to take Mom's house? The shop I built with my own hands? Because of some old piece of paper? It's not an old piece of paper. It's a legal will. It's bullshit. His voice rose, and a woman loading groceries 2 cars over glanced our way nervously. You lived in that basement because you couldn't handle the real world. We gave you a place to stay, and now you're trying to destroy us for it. You gave me a place to stay that I already owned. And you charged me rent for it. His face went red. You don't know what you're doing. You're going to regret this. Is that a threat? It's a warning. He leaned in close enough that I could smell coffee on his breath. Drop this lawsuit, or I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person you really are. Every mistake you've ever made, every embarrassing thing you've ever done. I'll put it all online, and Lisa's followers will eat it up. He got back in his truck and drove away, leaving me standing there with my groceries melting in bags at my feet. I called Ms. Voss from the parking lot. She listened to everything, her silence somehow more reassuring than words. Document everything, she said finally. They're scared, and scared people make mistakes. The mediation was scheduled for a Wednesday morning in a conference room that smelled like stale coffee and desperation. Ms. Voss had pushed for it, saying it would give my family one chance to settle before we took everything to court. I didn't want to see them, but I wanted to watch their faces when they realized what they'd lost. They arrived together, a united front. My mother in her church clothes, playing the part of the wounded matriarch. My brother in a suit that didn't fit right, trying to look legitimate. My sister with her phone out, recording right up until the mediator told her to put it away. Their lawyer was young, probably cheap. He kept glancing at his notes like he wasn't quite sure what he was doing there. My mother spoke first, her voice dripping with hurt. Melissa, sweetheart, this has gotten so out of hand. We're family. We don't need lawyers and mediators. We can work this out at home, the way Grandpa would have wanted. I said nothing. Ms. Voss had coached me. Let them talk themselves into corners. You know your grandfather wanted the house to stay in the family, my mother continued. He left it to me to take care of, to keep us all together. This will you found, it's outdated. There was another one, a newer one, that left everything to me. Ms. Voss didn't even blink. Then produce it. We'll wait. Silence. My brother leaned forward, his jaw tight. Look, the shop is barely making money. Even if you do own part of it, there's nothing there. You'd be fighting over scraps. Ms. Voss slid a folder across the table. These are your business tax returns for the past 4 years, which we subpoenaed last week. They show consistent annual profits averaging $68,000. Melissa's 40% share would be $27,200 per year. Over 4 years, that's $108,800 you've kept from her. My brother's face went white. My sister tried next, her voice breaking in that practiced way she used in her videos. Mom could lose her house because of this. Our childhood home. Is that really what you want? To make your own mother homeless? Your mother, Ms. Voss said calmly, will not be homeless. But due to the concealment clause in the will, she will forfeit 15% of her ownership to Melissa as penalty for hiding the inheritance. That gives Melissa majority ownership at 55%, which means Melissa will decide what happens to the house. Not your mother. The room went still. My mother's carefully composed expression finally cracked. You can't do that. It's already done, Ms. Voss replied. The clause activates automatically upon proof of concealment, which we have. The only question now is whether you want to settle the financial damages out of court or let a judge decide how much you owe. My mother looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something I'd never seen before.
Fear.
Melissa, please. Don't do this to us. I met her eyes and felt nothing.
No guilt. No sympathy.
Just cold, clear certainty. You did this to yourselves. The settlement took 2 weeks to finalize. 2 weeks of my family's lawyer trying to negotiate down the numbers, trying to find loopholes that didn't exist, trying to convince Ms. Voss that family court would be more sympathetic to a mother's intentions than to legal technicalities. Ms. Voss shut him down every time. The final agreement was 12 pages long. I read every word 3 times before signing. My mother would buy out my share of the family home for market value, which came to $132,000. The Austin rental property would be sold, with my 30% share netting me $68,000 after fees. My brother would close Gilbert Auto Repair and liquidate the assets, paying me 40% of the business value plus 4 years of back profits, totaling $94,000. Combined with the rent I'd paid and the concealment penalties, the total came to $327,000. They signed on a Friday afternoon. My mother's hand shook so badly she could barely hold the pen. My brother signed without looking at me, his jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. My sister wasn't there. She'd stopped coming after the mediation, probably because she couldn't film it for content. But the settlement included one more clause. The one I'd insisted on. Within 72 hours of signing this agreement, Sarah Gilbert and her children will post a public statement acknowledging the concealment of Melissa Gilbert's inheritance and retracting all defamatory social media content. My mother looked up at that, her eyes red. "You want us to humiliate ourselves?" "I want you to tell the truth," I said. "The same truth you should have told me 4 years ago." The statement went live on Sunday night. My mother posted it on Facebook. My brother posted it on his business page before shutting it down permanently. My sister posted it on Instagram, where her 15,000 followers could see it. We acknowledge that we failed to inform Melissa Gilbert of her rightful inheritance as outlined in our father's will. We withheld financial information and collected income that legally belonged to her. We deeply regret our actions and the pain we caused. The previous posts regarding this matter were inaccurate and unfair. We apologize. The comments came fast. Some people were sympathetic to my family, calling me vindictive. But most were confused, asking questions my siblings couldn't answer, without admitting more than they wanted to. A few people who'd called me a gold digger in my sister's DMs now sent me apologies I didn't read. My sister's follower count dropped by 3,000 in 2 days. My brother's shop closed the following week, a for lease sign appearing in the window like a tombstone. My mother stopped posting entirely, her Facebook page going silent for the first time in years. The narrative they'd built, the story where they were the generous family and I was the ungrateful burden, collapsed under the weight of a truth they could no longer hide. Jenna opened a bottle of wine the night the first check cleared. "How does it feel?" I thought about it, about the basement and the trash bags and the live stream, about 2 years of being made small. Like I can finally breathe. That first breath of freedom hit different. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever had to choose yourself over people who didn't choose you, subscribe to this channel. Your story matters too. And comment below if you've ever had to walk away from family to save yourself. I found an apartment in a quiet neighborhood 20 minutes from downtown. 1 bedroom, hardwood floors, windows that let in actual sunlight. It wasn't huge, but it was mine. Completely, legally, undeniably mine. Moving day was strange. I didn't have much, just what I'd salvaged from the lawn and a few things Jenna had helped me buy. A bed frame. A desk. A couch that didn't fold out or wobble. I spent the first night sitting on the floor eating takeout, surrounded by boxes, listening to the silence. No footsteps above me. No voices discussing me like I wasn't there. No performances, no cameras, no audience waiting for me to fail so they could feel better about themselves. Just quiet. My phone buzzed occasionally. My mother had sent 17 messages over the past month, each one more desperate than the last. She missed me.
She was sorry.
We were still family, weren't we? Couldn't we move past this? My brother sent one message. "Hope you're happy." My sister sent nothing, but she'd unblocked me on Instagram. I think she was hoping I'd look, that I'd see her posting about family loyalty and forgiveness, and read between the lines. I didn't look. I thought about revenge a lot in those early weeks.
about what it was supposed to feel like. Sweet, people said. Satisfying.
But sitting in my new apartment, looking at the bank statements that proved I wasn't crazy or lazy or a burden, I realized revenge wasn't what I'd gotten. I'd gotten the truth. The truth that I'd never been the parasite they'd called me. The truth that while they were performing generosity, they were committing fraud. The truth that my grandfather had seen something in me worth protecting, worth providing for, and they'd tried to erase that along with everything else. I wasn't vengeful. I was just finally completely free. My new job was going well. My boss had asked about the LinkedIn review, and I'd explained the situation calmly, factually, the way Ms. Voss had taught me. She deleted the review herself and told me she admired my strength. I didn't feel strong most days, but I was learning that strength wasn't about being unbreakable. It was about breaking and still getting up. On a Sunday morning 3 months after signing the settlement, I was drinking coffee on my small balcony when I saw a notification. My sister had posted a family photo. My mother, my brother, my sister, all smiling at a restaurant I didn't recognize. The caption read, "Family is everything." I stared at it for a long moment. They'd cropped me out of the narrative completely, pretending I'd never existed, rewriting history again for an audience that would never know the whole story. I closed the app and deleted it from my phone. They could have their story, their followers, their performances, their carefully edited version of a family that had never really existed. I had something better. I had the truth. I had my name on a lease I could afford. I had a life they couldn't touch. And I had silence. Beautiful, earned, uninterrupted silence. That was enough.